Welcome to the Futurist Society podcast, where we delve into the latest advancements in technology, science, and culture. From discussions on the latest breakthroughs in AI, biotechnology, and space exploration, the Futurist Society is your window into all of the awesomeness that the future holds. Get ready to be informed and inspired as we consider the positive impact of emerging technologies on humanity. Without further ado, welcome your host, Dr. Awesome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Futurist Society, where we are broadcasting from the present and talking about the future. Today, we have Dr. Shawn Talbott, who is a PhD in the realm of nutritional biochemistry, and he is also the Chief Science Officer for Amare, which is a company that's really doing some amazing things in the nutritional space, and it's something that I have particular interest in, so I'm very happy to have him on the show. So without further ado, Shawn, tell us about what you're doing at Amare and a little bit about your background, and then we're going to get right into it.
Yeah, sure. So at Amare, we have a tagline. Our tagline is the mental wellness company. So everything that we do comes back to some aspect of mental wellness. So your mood, your stress levels, your anxiety, your mental focus, your sleep quality, your energy levels, all that kind of stuff falls under mental wellness. And so with my background, as you said, I have a PhD in nutritional biochemistry, but the work that I do these days is sometimes called nutritional psychology. So we're looking at how food and nutrients and supplements impact biochemistry, things like cortisols and neurotransmitters and inflammatory markers and that kind of stuff. But then how does that biochemistry impact psychology? You know, how we feel and how we perform mentally. And that's what we base the whole company around. And it's kind of a right place at the right time, because man, oh man, everybody is talking about mental health right now, coming, post pandemic. So it's a good place to be.
Yeah, one of the studies that I always harken back to, and I tell everybody around me, is that coffee, if you drink 4 cups a day of coffee,
Yep.
It's equivalent in efficacy as an antidepressant, like an SSRI.
Right.
And so we know that there's these things out there that have the ability to be as effective and maybe a little bit more benign than some of the medications that are out there. So just starting from, let's say, depression, how is it that you are able to tailor a person's diet or supplement regimen to make them have less symptoms of depression?
Yeah. So there's really good body of research now around diet and mental well-being, right? So we know pretty convincingly that if somebody eats a standard American diet, lots of processed food, low fiber, low fruits and vegetables, high in salt and sugar, and processed, we know that that's highly associated with more depression, more anxiety. We know the flip of that is also true, that if somebody can, in fact, studies have been done to show we can take somebody off of a standard American diet and put them on sort of a Mediterranean style diet that has more fruits and vegetables, more fiber, healthy fats, that kind of stuff. It's not only preventative for depression, it is therapeutic for depression. So you can take people who are depressed, put them on that sort of a diet for 6 weeks, and within that time frame, they are no longer depressed at the end. And so it tells us lots of things, right? It tells us that diet's related to mental well-being, but it also tells us that how you feel is not just in your head, it's also in your gut, right? It's what we feed ourselves. And that gets into, we can maybe talk about this later, it's getting us to a point where we can be really sort of precision nutrition, and we can say, well, what is it about the gut and the microbiome, the bacteria in the gut and your gut lining? And we can get very precise about targeting the nutrients that we give to people to say, okay, these are going to increase your good bacteria and they're going to make more serotonin and you're going to be happier, just as one example. But that's where the whole field is really going, that, it's not just a brain thing when we talk about mental wellness, it really is a whole body thing. So we talk a lot about the gut-brain axis and the microbiome, and we can unpack that as we go through our discussion.
Yeah, no, I would love to unpack it, because I feel like in medical school, I know a lot about how nutrition can affect us in the short term. When you eat a big meal, you have this postprandial feeling of lethargy and just like slowness. And that's something that is very much tied to your diet. And that's something that I've learned, not only from medical school, but personal experience. I'm sure many of our listeners have eaten a big meal and they just feel like plopping on the couch and they don't really want to do anything. but kind of the long-term effects, I think, is something that I really want to talk about today, because the the insidiousness of mental illness is that it affects you in the long term. It makes something more difficult for you to do that otherwise would be easy. And so those kind of long-term effects are something I'm particularly interested in, because I want to make sure that I'm performing at the optimal level, not just from an hour to hour, but just in general. So what are you seeing in regards to, we'll talk about diet. I do want to talk a little bit about supplements, but in just specifically diet, like how are you changing somebody's diet regimen, and like what are the effects that you're seeing downstream of that?
Yeah, so the downstream effects are really important because, when I talk about mental wellness, I try to educate people about mental wellness existing on a continuum, right? So a lot of times people will hear me say mental wellness and they'll automatically default to thinking in their heads, oh, mental illness, right? That's something that's not me. I'm
Yeah.
not depressed. I don't have anxiety. I don't have burnout. So they think, maybe that's not an issue for me. That's just one part of the whole mental wellness continuum that we're all on. A lot of people, probably a lot of the listeners right now, are in the middle of that mental wellness continuum where you just feel you feel fine. You feel okay. You don't feel great. You might feel kind of blah. The stereotypical is that you're going to feel a little fatigued in the day. You're going to feel a little bit of brain fog. You maybe can't relax quite enough at night to get a good quality sleep. And most people look at that and go, well, that seems normal, right? That seems like modern life. And it seems like, I'm busy and I've got a job and I've got kids and I've got a spouse and I've got all these responsibilities. So sure, I guess I'm supposed to feel that way. And what I want them to realize is that that is not the normal human condition. The normal human condition is abundant energy during the day. You're able to turn it on when you want to turn it on. You're able to turn it off and relax and get good quality relaxation and good quality sleep at night. And most people hear me say that and they go, yeah, sure, but not for me. But that's what I mean when I talk about mental wellness. And so what we try to do is, I used to do a lot of work. Early part of my career, I was more what you would consider to be a sport nutritionist. A lot of work for U.S. Track and Field Association, U.S. Ski Team, Olympic training centers, trying to get those people who are at the high end of the mental wellness continuum on a scale of 1 to 10, they might be a 9. But if you're working with an Olympic athlete who's a 9, they want to be a 9.1, a 9.2, 9.3, so they get that competitive edge. We're using some of the same techniques now and kind of mainstreaming them so that the average person that just wants to perform their best can do that in the context of their stressful life.
Yeah, I love where that whole field is going. I think that it started out with high performance athletes and now it's becoming a lot more egalitarian, where
Yeah, it's kind of trickling down a little bit, isn't it? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So like, I even my wife and I talk about this all the time. Like when we were growing up, just the concept of calories wasn't really a thing. Like the idea of going out to eat, you weren't really looking at the healthier option. There wasn't really a lot of healthy options out there available, and now there are. And so I do like the way that the field is trending. Do you find that more people are adopting that, or is it really just the same types of people? Like that's one of the things I was worried about, because I'm pursuing this in my own life, but I know I'm a very driven person. Are you seeing people that are maybe in the middle or the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to wellness, seeking your services out?
Yeah, and that's the best part of it to see. Like there's always going to be the sort of high performers that are always looking for that edge. They'll readily adopt this kind of stuff. They'll go, yeah, let me try it. And if I can get that competitive edge, good. I'm doing all these other things, so let me try this too. But where we're seeing the most sort of like the biggest changes are that average person that thinks they're fine, and then they do some of the supplements that we have, or some of the diet therapies, or some of the movement programs that we have. There's all kinds of ways we can improve mental wellness, but that person will do it and they will come back and they'll go, oh my gosh, I didn't even know I had brain fog until it went away. I didn't even know I was fatigued until my energy came back. I didn't even know I was tense until I was able to calm down and get a good night's sleep, right? So there's those sort of regular people that are kind of leveling up in terms of their mental and physical performance, which is great. But then we have a lot of people who are at the low end of the mental wellness continuum. Like they might have a little depression or a little anxiety or something like that. And they've gone the traditional route. They've tried a sleep drug. They've tried an antidepressant. They've tried an anti-anxiety drug. And it hasn't quite gotten them to feel they want to feel, they, those drugs absolutely change how you feel, but they don't make you feel good. And there's a lot of people, millions of people have been down that road and said, you know what, that isn't what I'm looking for, right? That didn't do it for me. And so they're starting to look at some of these natural therapies. And because the natural therapies are much more holistic, it's not working on just your serotonin pathway, for example, like a Prozac would do. It's working on, a coordination of your neurotransmitters. They feel a lot better. And so that person's at the low end of the continuum. Now you can move them up into the middle of the continuum, so they feel sort of quote unquote normal again. And then they start to think, well, wait a minute, what else could I do? Could I level up? Could I get better? Could I get better? Could I get better? And that's what's really cool to see when someone has that journey of getting better and better and better. It's good for them, right? But it's also good for their families. It's good for their friends and their coworkers and everybody they interact with.
Yeah, that's one. I actually had a guy on that was a public health researcher, and he found that your ability to become healthy affects downstream your family, your friends,
Right.
everything like that. And so, one person adopting a healthier lifestyle really has a lot of downstream effects, and we're just beginning to measure those kind of things. But let's talk a little bit about measurement, because I feel like that's something, especially in the nutritional setting, that I don't really know what the objective difference is between one thing and versus another.
Right.
What are you measuring when it comes to, let's say, performance, let's say longevity, let's say mental health? Like, give me some of the measurements that you're seeing, like when somebody undergoes a lifestyle change like that, that I can say, okay, like this is something that like I can look to as an objective indicator of increased health.
Yeah. So in the clinical trials that we do, we'll do a lot of measurements. So when we measure mood state, right, and we're looking to see, are people feeling better? A lot of times people will look at that and go, well, those are kind of squishy measurements, right? You're just asking people if they're feeling better, and that's not real data. But how we actually measure it are with very well-designed, validated psychological metrics, things like profile of mood states, and if we're looking at a sleep study, we use the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Inventory, right? Things that have been validated and are objective measurements, right? They're still surveys, but they're validated. So profile of mood states is one of my favorites because it will give you an overall score, sort of like a well-being score called global well-being. But then you can have subscales, and you can dial down into each of those subscales, and you can see, is somebody feeling better because they're less depressed, or because they're less anxious, or because they're less fatigued? And sometimes, depending on the intervention, someone will feel overall better, and it's all due to an antidepressive effect, or they'll feel a little bit better and it's all due to an anti-fatigue effect. So it's good to be able to kind of slice and dice that a little bit, because there's all sorts of different mood states, right? Somebody who feels better because they're less stressed, that's different than somebody who feels better because they're more energetic, right? And so we can, like I said before, like we're getting to the point where we can be like precision nutrition a little bit. So that's how we do the psychology piece of it. But as a nutritional biochemist, I want to know the mechanism. I want to know why they're feeling better.
Right.
So we also routinely will measure microbiome panels. So we're taking fecal samples for that. We're measuring inflammatory markers, either in the saliva or the blood. We're measuring stress hormones in saliva. So we're in some studies, we're even looking at, lipid panels, like, cholesterols and triglycerides and glucose levels and all that kind of stuff. Because what we really want to do is be able to link the objective biochemistry to the subjective psychology and be able to sort of see what the mechanisms are. Like if we lower cortisol by 20%, what does that do to somebody's overall stress levels, and vice versa?
That's awesome. Yeah. No, I think that's where I feel like a lot of people in the medical profession get a little bit hesitant to even really get involved in nutrition, just because there's not really objective measurements right now. Like when we look at nutrition, we're looking at things like prealbumin, which is an indicator of just overall nutritional status, right? It's not so much a very pinpoint surgical look at, okay, this person has less cortisol, so that means that they might be feeling better, and then that's been backed up by the way that the person is feeling.
Right.
So,
Exactly. We did a trial a couple of years ago where we were trying to we're trying to get to the point of like saying how does this all impact? You know, we can be very isolationist and sort of and reductionist and say, okay, we fed people this and their microbiome did that. Or we can even, you know, look into the microbiome and say, well, your Akkermansia went up 20% and your lactobacillus went up 18%. Like we can do that kind of stuff. But we want to look more globally and say, well, what is this doing for the people's lives? So we designed a trial where we said, here's the regimen we're going to put you on: probiotics and prebiotics and proteins and really healthy nutrition set. And we told the people in the trial, do not change your diet patterns, do not change your exercise patterns, don't sleep better, just do your normal thing. We're going to follow your blood chemistry over time. So we measured their blood, we measured their saliva, we measured their microbiome, we did all this stuff. And all those changed in a positive direction, right? So we had all the objective measurements. But what we were actually looking at in the trial was we gave everybody an activity tracker, you know, like a little Garmin watch. And we were measuring their stress levels and their sleep patterns and their steps and heart rate variability and all that kind of stuff. And what we found was, because the good nutrition helped them feel better and changed all their biochemistry, it changed their behavior. People were subconsciously choosing a better diet. They were moving their bodies more. They were getting more minutes of REM sleep and deep sleep and all that kind of stuff. So it really told us that, hey, if we can get people to feel better with good nutrition, they're going to start behaving better and making better lifestyle choices, which, I mean, let's be honest, everybody knows they're supposed to eat better. Everybody knows they're supposed to move their bodies more. And yet we don't, because we feel kind of crappy. We feel fatigued and we feel like we don't have time and we feel stressed out. So if we can intervene on that psychological level, people actually make better choices in the rest of their life. It was a revelation for us.
That's awesome. I do want to focus on the gut bacteria for just a second, because it's something that is very popular in literature right now, this idea of the gut-brain axis.
Right.
Many people don't realize that there's this feedback mechanism between what you eat and the gut neurons and then the brain neurons. And so when we're talking about a healthy gut microbiome, like, what are you looking for? Because I know that there's specific bacteria that are indicated for specific things. Like one of the things that I'm taking a probiotic to increase my testosterone, because I'm at that age where like my testosterone is going to be dropping. And so there's a lot of studies on Lactobacillus reuteri, which is a bacteria that is supposedly increases testosterone, and some people are taking it. But what are you looking for? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when we're measuring microbiomes in individuals or in groups of people in our clinical trials, we're looking at lactobacillus, we're looking at bifidobacterium, we're looking at Akkermansia, we're looking at ratios between some of the bacteria. So bacteria like there's a very popular measurement called the F to B ratio, Firmicutes to Bacteroides ratio, that's related to metabolism. Firmicutes are really good at harvesting calories from your diet. Bacteroides are less good at that. So if you have too many Firmicutes, you're more likely to gain weight. If you have too many Bacteroides or more Bacteroides, you're less likely to gain weight. So we can use that in some of the weight loss trials that we do. So the thing with the microbiome, though, it's still early days, right? It's changing how we think about mental wellness. It's changing how we think about human health. But it's kind of relative to the individual. People will ask me all the time, they go, well, what's a good microbiome number? And there is no such thing. Like we don't have that kind of data right now. We can't say like a cholesterol number. We can't say you need to be under 200 or whatever the number is going to be. We don't have that for the microbiome now. So we'll test people and see where they are right now. And then we'll do an intervention, like a nutrition intervention, and we'll see how it changes. And we can say, well, do your good bacteria go up? That's a good thing. Do your bad bacteria go down? That's a good thing. Does your Akkermansia go up? That indicates a better gut integrity, so less leaky gut. So there's certain things we can tell about the microbiome, but then we coordinate or correlate the microbiome change with a biochemical change, like a cortisol or an inflammatory marker. And then we'll correlate that with a psychological marker, like a depression index or a sleep quality index or something like that. So that's how that side of it goes. But then the question is, how do you change that? So if you look at probiotic supplements, like you just mentioned, what I really try to educate people about is this idea of strain specificity. that you have to have the right strain of bacteria to do the effect that you're looking for. So some strains, like you just mentioned, will increase testosterone. Other strains will increase serotonin. Other strains will increase GABA. Other strains will lower cortisol. So unless you know the specific strain that you're getting, or the benefit that you're trying to get, you can line up the strain with the benefit. But unfortunately, most products on the market right now don't even tell you the strain. They'll just say Lactobacillus acidophilus, and that tells you almost nothing.
So do you take probiotics yourself?
I do, yeah. And
So what do you take?
one that I take every day, and one that I've used in some of the formulations that I've done, is called Lactobacillus. Let me try to get this right now. Lactobacillus rhamnosus R0011. So that R0011 strain increases GABA, so a relaxing neurotransmitter, and decreases cortisol, stress hormone. So it's sort of like it's dialing down a negative signal, cortisol, and it's dialing up a positive signal, GABA. So that's kind of like an anti-stress bacterial strain. But the reason I said that in its full name, Lactobacillus rhamnosus R0011, is that it's that R0011 strain designation that lets us know it's anti-stress. There's another strain called GG, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, that's really good for traveler's diarrhea. There's another one called GR1, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GR1, that's really good for recurrent yeast infections in women. There's another one called LR32, Lactobacillus rhamnosus 32, that's good for regulating your gut motility, so it can help with constipation or diarrhea. So it all determines the strain.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, I don't know anything about that stuff. So tell me. I mean, I feel like I have a little bit of an understanding, but even me as a surgeon, like it's not something that we learn about necessarily in medical school.
Right.
So tell me a little bit more about just like a lot of what we talked about was correlation. Let's talk about causation, right? Like, let's talk, like, so just explain to me like the pathway that we know so far about how the bacteria that you are taking increases the amount of GABA. So in as much as we know right now.
Yeah. So as much as we know right now is that we can give specific strains of bacteria to increase serotonin in the gut, or increase GABA in the gut, or increase dopamine in the gut. And as a result of that, people feel better, right? We like, those data exist. We have that out there. What we don't know yet, though, is what is the exact mechanism that's going on here? Because we know increasing serotonin in the gut, that serotonin in the gut does not get into the brain, right? It can't cross the blood-brain barrier. We know that. So somehow the serotonin increase in the gut has to be sending a signal. Maybe it's sending a signal across the vagus nerve, which is sort of a hardwired connection from the gut to the brain. Maybe it's sending a signal through the immune system. 70% of your immune system is in your gut, and your immune system can actually take the signals from your microbiome and reach up into your brain and talk to the glial cells in your brain. So the immune system might be the pathway. It could be that the neurotransmitters in your gut are sometimes changing your inflammatory markers in your blood, your cytokines, and the cytokines can get across the blood-brain barrier. So that piece of it is still being teased out. So we know we sort of have cause and effect, but the middle piece of it is still a little bit of a black box that we're trying to figure out. But it's promising because it really gives us these tools that we didn't have even 10 years ago to really help bring to bear on this problem of helping people feel their best mentally. And if you feel better mentally, you're going to perform better physically. You're going to, like I said, you're going to make those better lifestyle choices, and that's going to permeate all aspects of your life.
Yeah. So we do know that the more variety of bacteria that you have is an indicator of health, right? Like that's something
that's the one thing that all of us, like we scientists who study the microbiome, agree on, is that more diversity is a good thing.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. I want to know right now, like, what are some like high level things that we can take away that like everybody agrees on? Because I feel like sometimes thought leaders like yourself have a really deep dive in a particular sector, but I want to know, like, what are some general things that anybody, whether they're performance interested or whether they're interested in getting their mood correct and stabilized? Like, what are some general things that a person can do to make sure that they just have a healthier life overall?
Yeah, that's a great question. As much as I love to get into the weeds of this strain of bacteria and this structure of prebiotic fiber and this herbal extract and that kind of thing, like the biggest thing, the easiest thing that everybody should be doing is eating less processed food and eating more fruits and vegetables. Like that right there would go a long way. And the reason's really simple. If you're eating a lot of processed foods, you're eating a lot of sugar, which is bad for a variety of reasons, but processed food is going to be low in fiber. And if you're not getting enough fiber, you are starving your microbiome. Your microbiome, your good bacteria want to eat fiber. That's their preferred, well, that's their only fuel source. And if you're on a low fiber diet, you're starving out your microbiome. So you have to eat more fiber. The easiest way to eat more fiber is not with a supplement. The easiest way to eat more fiber is to eat a diversity of fruits and vegetables. So we actually have a challenge that we give to people that's called the 30 plant challenge. We want them to eat 30 different kinds of plants within a 7-day period. And we know that 30 is the magic number from a big project called the American Gut Project that looked at hundreds of thousands of microbiome samples. Mine was included in that sample set. And you can look at diversity. You can say, here's the diversity of what 5 servings of fruits and vegetables do. 10 servings is more diverse. 15 servings is more diverse. It plateaus out right around 30. So 30 is better than 25, but 35 isn't that much better than 30. So we tell people, eat your red peppers and yellow peppers, and eat your romaine lettuce and your green leaf lettuce, and eat your your blueberries and your pomegranates, and get as many as you can, and that's going to give a diversity of bacteria in your gut. And that's the hands down the best thing that people can do.
Great. That's something that's really interesting. So I mean, your clients, like, do you have like a consulting service if they want to get in contact with you? How does it work in regards to, getting the benefits out of Amare?
Yeah, the easiest way. So amare.com, amare.com is the best place to find out about the kinds of products that we do. So we use specific strains of probiotic bacteria. We use specific structures of prebiotic fibers. We use very, very well validated herbal extracts, so mango leaf and lychee fruit and palm fruit and things that have good clinical evidence that we put into our products. But then we do clinical trials on our finished formulation. So you can see like, oh, well, they put in these 3 good ingredients, but what happens when they mix them together? Do they cancel each other out, or do they actually have an amplified benefit? A synergistic benefit is sort of the lingo in the supplement world. So we have that kind of stuff. And so amare.com is a really good resource for that. But then on my research side, people can just type in my name, ShawnTalbott.com, and go to my blog, and they can see the research studies that we're doing. So, sometimes we're looking at different strains of probiotics. Like right now we have a clinical going on. We're looking at a specific strain of probiotic bacteria for weight loss. We're also looking at a specific kind of natural yeast extract for its benefits, for anti-allergy benefits, right? So we run a lot of these like public clinical trials where people, if they have those symptoms, that they can sign up and go through the informed consent documents and things like that. So if people are interested to see like what is the cutting edge of these natural therapies, go to ShawnTalbott.com. You can find out.
Yeah. No, I'm very excited for the next generation, I think, of wellness, because I feel like there's this idea of healthcare, and that's very much a reactive situation where somebody is sick and we take care of them. But all of this preventative stuff, all of this maximizing our wellness and health before we get to the hospital or before we go see our doctor is something that's really interesting to me personally. I think that that's going to be a really interesting future. Right now, especially with like sensor technology, all of us have an Apple Watch or some sort of sensor that is tracking so many different things. Pairing that with things like supplements and our diet and stuff, but that's going to be a really interesting future for us.
Right. I think we'll eventually get to the point where we can personalize all of this. There's a little bit of that happening right now where you fill out a survey online and ask you some questions about your health, and that's like I wouldn't say that that's personalized nutrition. I would say it's semi-personalized or semi-customized right now. But we'll get to the point where we'll be able to measure someone's microbiome and make recommendations on that. And we'll look at their inflammatory markers and make recommendations on that. And we'll take a DNA sample and make recommendations on that. And like someday this will all be mainstream stuff. Well, you'll go in for your annual checkup and they'll measure your microbiome just like they measure your blood pressure, just like they measure your cholesterol. That'll someday be a new health marker.
Is there any place that's doing that right now? Like if I'm interested in doing that, are you guys doing that?
We're like, we do it for our trials, but we don't do it as a personal service. There are clinics around the country that are starting to do that. These sort of like, bespoke clinics that aren't covered by insurance. You definitely pay out of pocket, but a lot of the wellness spas, Canyon Ranches and like those sorts of places are starting to offer these kinds of services. So I think if you can afford it, it's good information.
Yeah.
But it's not really mainstream accessible at this point yet.
I know we're both in the Boston area. So do you know any place around here that's doing this kind of stuff?
I don't. I think they're all West Coast places, to be honest with you, right? Yeah. I think that stuff will eventually get here. Maybe it's a service I should start adding here.
Yeah, you should. I totally think that it would be benefit every time I go into my physician, because like I'm really interested in performance and longevity, right? Both are things that are very popular right now.
Yeah.
I always want him to do the stuff that's going to help me later on down the road. But honestly, like, the majority of stuff that we know right now is such low-hanging fruit. Like, he's testing me for, my lipids. He's testing me. He's like making sure that I'm not smoking, like this kind of stuff that, like, listen, like that's something that I already know. Right. I want to like have like a deep dive into myself, and I'm like, okay, if you do this, then you will get that,
Right, exactly.
But I haven't found any place around here, and like every person in this space, I always ask them about that, like, who can I go to? A lot of people say, what's his name, Dr. Atia, that's on.
Yep.
He has like a private consulting service, but like I actually called them, and it's so difficult to get in because now he's like servicing all these celebrities and stuff.
Right. Yeah, access is difficult.
Yeah,
you just mentioned something about longevity. That's something I'm super interested in right now, because a lot of the things that we're doing at the level of the microbiome to help people with mental wellness issues are some of the very same things that other groups are doing to extend lifespan. So there's this really cool study came out about a year ago where they took they did a microbiome transplant on these old versus young mice. Take the microbiome from a young mouse, put it into an old mouse, and in every parameter you can imagine, the old mouse performed as a youngster. Its brain changed, its immune system changed, its inflammatory markers changed, its behavior changed. And I look at like those microbiome signals, and they're the exact same things that we're doing to help people feel better, mental wellness. And so it gives me a lot of hope that we get somebody to feel better and happier and more energetic. And hopefully that's doing something to their longevity as well. But that's a tough study to do in humans.
I know. It's a very, very difficult study to do in humans, but I can't wait until we tap into that, because I feel like that's something that's low-hanging fruit that unfortunately, because of just the rigors of going through the academic research process, it's very difficult to conduct studies that may have some sort of ethical issue or something like that, which honestly is a good thing, so that we don't end up in bad situations. But sometimes it kind of delays progress a little bit. But no, I think that one of the things that I see all the time in regards to performance and longevity that's coming up is these regenerative medicine clinics, or I don't know what the exact term for it, but it's a physician that you go in to see, and they basically do like a whole bunch of labs and they put you on stuff. But I feel like it's so much more geared towards hormones. Hormones are so
you're right, exactly.
They're so in vogue right now, and that's why I'm trying to increase my own hormones by increasing my testosterone, which is something that we know makes you feel better and it helps you perform better. But I don't think that there's a lot of people that are doing it from a nutrition basis, other than just generalized stuff.
The approach that we take at Amare, we have a testosterone. I hate to call it a testosterone booster, but I'll just say that so people know what we're talking about. It's a combination of 3 herbs One is called Tongetta Lee, one's called Cordyceps, and one is Rhodiola. And I've used them with athletes for years and years and years. So in athletes, what that combination does, it doesn't boost their testosterone. It doesn't take normal testosterone and make it any higher, but it can take low testosterone and bring it up to normal. And the way that it does that is that some of the ingredients in those herbs will help this binding hormone called sex hormone binding globulin that binds testosterone, makes it unavailable in the body. It will help that release. And so you can get someone's free testosterone to come back up to normal levels naturally before they have to resort to doing a patch or a cream or an injection or something like that. So that's one approach. I'm actually going to look up this probiotic strain that you're taking, because that's something I wasn't aware of.
Yeah. No, we'll share more. But listen, we're coming to the end of our time now, and I did want to make sure that I address the 3 questions that I ask all my guests. So number 1, I got to know, Dr. Shawn Talbott, like, what are you taking in your own life to make sure you're healthier?
So I take a lot of supplements, right? I try to eat my 30 plants every week. I try to eat as few processed foods as possible. I still like to have my coffee. I still like to have a glass of wine, so like I'm what I refer to as an 80-20 nutritionist. 80% of the time I'm doing pretty good and I'm on my plan. And 20% of the time I'm enjoying myself and, cheating a little bit here and there, right? It's good, so there. But I take specific strains of probiotic bacteria to help with stress and depression and anxiety. And even though I want to have the best, most comprehensive resilience possible so I can handle as much. So I take a lot of the Amare products, right? I formulated the products. I know the ingredients in there. Like, I take them, I recommend them to everybody else. So one product is called Mentabiotics. I highly recommend that people look at. It's a whole gut-brain axis system. But the idea is that if you can get optimized what's happening in the gut, it doesn't stay in the gut. It permeates the whole rest of your body, physical performance, mental performance. So those are the kinds of things that I'm supplementing.
That's cool. I'll have to check it out. I'll have to go to your website and order some for myself. And we'll see each other again because we live close to each other.
Yeah, I hope so.
I'm sure that I can give you my recommendations after I take it. So that's number 1. Number 2, what I wanted to ask you about is just like, you seem like a pretty fit guy. Like, what are you doing for exercise so that you remain as high performing as you can do?
Yeah, so I'm an endurance nut. So I do Ironman triathlons and run marathons and ultra marathons and that kind of stuff. I'm in my workout clothes right now. I just actually went to the gym this morning before, before we decided to talk. There's one thing I have to force myself to do is go lift weights. I know how good it is for me, and yet I don't do it as often as I need to.
For somebody that's just normal, that isn't really as active, like, what would you suggest that they do to maximize their benefit?
Yeah, so in the programs that we do, I try to recommend that people do a combination of endurance work. So interval walking is the easiest thing for people to do, which basically means walk fast for a minute, walk easy for a minute, walk fast for 2 minutes, walk easy for 2 minutes, and you just keep alternating that for however much time you have. That's going to give you the endurance piece of it. You don't have to go out and blow your brains out in terms of high intensity training if you don't want to. But then you also have to do strength training, right? So, and it can be body weight stuff. It can be squats. It can be push-ups. It can be what I call hinges, right? Where you're bending over and picking something up off the floor. Those are all our normal motions that we're supposed to be doing. And if you can strengthen those, that's going to be good for your overall functionality.
Cool. Yeah, that's good. Always good to know. So lastly, like, I am always interested in where experts and thought leaders like yourself see us going as a species. So, like, where do you see nutrition going in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think so. My perspective as a nutritionist might be a little bit biased, but I think that nutrition is the most impactful intervention that we have access to, because when you consume food, it becomes part of you. When you consume food, it changes your microbiome. It changes the structure of your brain, either positively or negatively. And so I think we're in a time in history where we're learning enough about the impact of nutrition to get to the point of precision nutrition, where we can say, oh, if you're trending towards depression, we can change that trajectory. If you're trending towards accelerated aging, we can change that trajectory. So getting to the point where we can maybe prevent some of these problems from even happening in the first place by giving the right nutrients, because it changes the biochemistry, it changes the structure, it changes the physiology, changes the psychology. Yeah, it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, I think tailored nutrition, I agree with you. I can't wait. That's what I'm actively looking for that in my own life, so we'll talk later and we'll share some recommendations with each other about different things that we can help each other with, as well as our listeners. But man, thank you so much. And I really want to have you back on the show because I am incorporating some things in my own life, and I'd love to try some of your products and give you some feedback. And obviously we live so close to each other. Next time we got to do this in person. Okay?
We'll do this in person for sure. That'll be great energy.
So nice to meet you. And
Likewise.
For our listeners, thank you for joining us on the Futurist Society, where we're talking about the future. So I'll see you next time in the future. Have a good one.
We appreciate you taking part in today's episode. Take this chance to reimagine a better future by joining a community of futurists who strive for a remarkable world. Be a part of this growing network and contribute to making the world a more positive place. Visit thefuturistsociety.net and subscribe to the show so you don't miss a drop of hopeful futurism.